What's good, guys? It's your boy Wally J, and today I'm back with some more of the daily takeaway. And we are still in chapter 4 of Sapiens. We're actually going to finish it today, which is essentially chapters 84. It's my fault, not 84. Yes, actually, my fault. It's pages 84 through 97. And we are now officially actually on chapter 6. I don't know when I switched to chapter 5, but we got through that thing. Anyway, what I wanted to talk to you though is about this thing called the luxury trap. Something that I am recognizing or seeing with our history as I've been going through this book is we are very counterintuitive to evolution. And something that is very stunning, I should say, about evolution and kind of what was going on at this time, especially for things like goats, pigs, sheep, these things that we were domesticating, along with, you know, some of these crops that you could ultimately say as well. But a big sign of it, actually, I can't say crops. I would say the crops are the only thing that actually won during the agricultural revolution. Because they had better conditions, they were grown all over the place, and they were allowed to freaking spread like crazy. Now, I say all that, but you know, humans were becoming more and more abundant, and the reason for that is because now that we're actually staying in one spot, being a traveler slash nomadic, it actually made it really hard to raise young. So a lot of times people would not get a newborn, or they would literally choose to not even have sex until their new child was at least 4 years old, when they could actually start moving and being autonomous. Obviously, there's going to be some more things to learn, but that's kind of what it went into. So women were just more focused in on that, meaning, hey, we have, you know, 4 times just off of that, like one family, 4 times is less humans being born on a 4-year period. So pretty cool, honestly, to think about as well. But something I would even say is really cool is that apparently during good times, puberty actually happens earlier for women. And during bad times, it happens a little bit later, and their fertility actually decreases. In good times, it actually increases. And this is because obviously when times are good, you want to be able to reproduce as much as possible. I think it's kind of crazy or cool that it's actually like baked into our genealogy, into our DNA, where those things happen. Now, what am I talking about in terms of evolution and what we were doing and it being a trap, this luxury trap, and this thing that goes on? So the idea of just this luxury trap is that the farther and farther we go creating luxuries, right? So things like shelter, things like, hey, a permanent source of food that you always can rely on, these different things, is that there comes a point when the luxury now becomes what feels like a necessity. And we no longer appreciate the necessity, or excuse me, the luxury, like we did before, and now we just we expect it to be there, which honestly is an issue. And actually, I'm going to get into this pretty deeply because essentially what was going on here, and like I'll get into a couple of topics on why it doesn't really make sense for us to want to do this. Is number one, we started dealing with a lot more disease-ridden settlements. So we were just straight up more susceptible to disease. Also, as we started getting into farmers and getting more into grains, these children, these babies, actually stopped. There was more child mortality, even though there were more babies being born. And I guess you can kind of say, like, because there were more babies being born, this happened. But no, actually, the reason there were more babies dying was because instead of actually raising these kids and allowing them to drink the milk of their mother, they started giving them grains. And ultimately, this is going to lead to just underdeveloped, you know, humans, more particularly into their immune systems. And then obviously us beginning into these settlements, they're now this place that is just going to be widespread with freaking diseases. So just off of that, it doesn't really make sense to go that way. Now, most people would ask, well, what was the miscalculation? Why did it get like that? What's going on? Like, if it doesn't make sense, why the heck wouldn't we just turn around and go backwards, right? The problem is this happened over multiple generations. This happened with multiple tweaks along the way. And it's kind of funny that I think this quote just literally continues to keep coming up. I'm going to say it one more time, but by giving language to experience, we gain awareness of our conceptual models of the world, which means, right, as we go out and we start to experience these things and we can actually speak to what is going on, we now have the awareness that, hey, this probably wasn't the most, how would I put, because it effectively said, hey, there are going to be more of us, but we may not have been living the best lives anymore. Kind of like I was talking about in a previous chapter. So it kind of goes back to just this idea that we start to go and move and ultimately figure things out. And then later we kind of are like, oh, snap, this was a problem. This was probably not right. And then we're sitting here forced to try and figure out how we can actually bridge that gap when ultimately there is no gap to ultimately bridge. We have gone to this place now that most would say there is now, we can literally now no longer go back. And a big reason for that is we now have, you know, thousands of people. The only way to go back would be to say, hey, let's go back to these nomadic lives. We now need to break out into realms of 10, 20, or however many to get back into these groups of about 100 people. And guess what? At this point in time, there's just not enough food. There's going to be not enough resources in the area that they live. So it's whether they got to go somewhere far off or do whatever, right? But the point is, we now had trapped ourselves into this space where we thought we were building more luxuries. We thought we were getting to a place that would be better for us to live in. And turns out it wasn't. The pursuit of an easy life resulted in hardship. That's so crazy to think about. I'm gonna say it again. The result of an easy life resulted in hardship, right? And it's funny because I've been living by a quote recently that it says, once you accept that life is going to be hard, life gets easy. And it's so true. Life, number one, was always going to be hard. It's always going to be a level bit of work. It's always going to have some level of resistance that you're going to need to be able to work through. But once you accept that that resistance is there, guess what? You're not sitting here in the battle of, hey, whether I want to fight this or not. You already know the battle that you need to go out and fight. Here, for instance, we kind of didn't know that. And it's funny. The biggest thing I would ultimately say is that we're really, really big about we're addicted. We are addicted to hardship. We are addicted to making our lives harder. We are addicted to just chaos, essentially, and hardship. Like, we are just genuinely, we love it. We love it to death. We want to be in that space. We want to live in that space. So yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I can sit here and tell that or speak to myself on that because as many girlfriends I've had that have been pretty crazy. Yeah, anyway, so most people will say, like, okay, well, why did we decided to go that way, and get into that in the second part of, or I should say the back half of chapter 5. Sorry, I was wrong about that. Where was chapter 4? Was I just always on 5 and yeah, my bad. 4 ended on 5 was the start of agricultural revolution. I'm totally messing up. So anyway, but yeah, so one of the big things that they talk about is that there was actually a space where people feel like there's a level of culture, almost like a belief system or a religion that people were following at this time that said, hey, let us live here. And the reason for that is sorry, I'm going to pronounce this awfully wrong, but Gobekli Tepe. And it was essentially this temple that was proven. It's really hard to believe that one generation made this. So there was multiple generations of multiple different tribes that came together to build this. And one of the things that was apparent there was actually a wheat field, and one of the first ever wheat fields in the Kara Kadog Hills was less than about 20 miles away from the Göbekli Tepe. Which is very, very significant, because what that means to say is we were believing in things way beyond ourselves, and we were willing to put in ridiculous amounts of work to get to something that we may never see. And I think that's also something very contingent of Homo sapiens and just our ability to want things that we cannot see or touch yet, right? What it talked about in the cognitive revolution, one of the biggest reasons that we're able to actually come together is because of these things that we believe in that we ultimately cannot see or touch. So really cool. But one thing I did want to mention is that all of these animals as well, just kind of like how the crops were going crazy and vibing. Animals ultimately stepped into this space as well, and these animals that got domesticated, that we were domesticating, yes, they won from a species, from an evolutionary success, but in their realm of their quality of life, it was completely shafted. Along with kind of like how humans were, but obviously they don't even have the willpower or the know-how to create their situation or make it any better. So I thought this was very interesting. The biggest thing I wanted to just, I guess, mention or hit on in this episode is just the fact that we are addicted to hardship. If there's one thing that I'm obviously trying to understand society here and different things, right? But if there is one thing that I can sit here and say that not only is it apparent then, but it is also apparent now, is people are addicted to hardship. People love going through hard stuff, even though they may not think so. And we have the mindset of, hey, let me go through something hard, because there's going to be a good thing on the other side. The problem I think that some of these things had is sometimes there's a miscalculation along the way, and we may actually have that wrong, which is very unfortunate. But that being said, that is it for chapter 5. Chapter 5 ultimately telling us that the agricultural revolution was a fraud, not from the realm of being able to produce large groups of people and have us multiply at an insane rate, but ultimately from the standpoint of our quality of life actually decided to go and plunge into a gutter, ultimately, so that we could reproduce at ridiculous rates, along with animals. So pretty cool. Next chapter will be chapter 6, and we'll be getting into the building of the pyramids. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.